Hey, what's going on, guys? Ray Shapley, Where to Live in Austin, and I am finally back on YouTube. And I got to say, I'm really excited to be able to do videos again. So this will be the first of more to come, but let's get into it. So this video is really about a question we got from a client not too long ago. And the question was simply, are there areas in the suburbs of Austin that are not cookie cutter, that don't have that cookie cutter feel? I figure I could just rattle off 10 or 15. No, I got to like 3. So I started looking around, doing a little bit of research, and I came up with this list of 7. And my hopes with this video is I'm going to put the list of 7 out here, but I'd love for people who've lived in Austin or are in neighborhoods that they feel kind of qualify for this in the Austin area. Chime in the comments below. I'd love to get this conversation going because I do think there are a fair amount of people out there who are, they need to be in the suburbs for whatever reason. It might be the schools, might be the price point, might be the location, but they don't necessarily want the typical, what you call like the cookie cutter look of a home. And I get that, totally fine. I'd love to be a resource for them. I'd love for this video to be a resource for them, or at least the comment section. So I'm going to give you my 7 here, but please, again, in the comments, light it up with your own recommendations. So for the purpose of this video, I really want to define suburbs as anything from 10 miles from downtown Austin out to 20 miles from downtown Austin, that kind of ring around Austin. Sure, it could go out further than that, no question, but just in terms of, what I see the majority of people searching for when they say suburbs, this would be it. And this is what I'd like to stick to just to kind of keep some boundaries on things. One more thing is I'm not going to focus on real big acreage type properties. There are some really beautiful communities that have, acre plus, but I think most people, when they're talking about the suburbs, they're not talking about that. They're talking about a smaller lot product, somewhere in the 0.25 up to 0.5 or half an acre. Okay, now let's define cookie cutter. Because again, this can mean different things to different people. In my experience working with clients over the years, when they say cookie cutter, what they mean is a combination of things. Usually it's a repetition or kind of a uniformity in terms of the way homes look. Typically the homes are kind of wedged, jammed in there together, so smaller lot lines. Oftentimes there's a lack of trees because the neighborhoods are so new. So when you kind of combine all those, you get a newer, uniform look. And I think a lot of people who want non-cookie cutter neighborhoods are looking for something with more character. Maybe they'd call it charm. And that's what we're going to talk about today. How do we find that in areas like the suburbs? Because what you have to understand is there's a reason suburbs look the way they do. Most of the time, suburbs were all built roughly at the same time because, if you look back at Austin's population 50, 100 years ago, it was tiny compared to now. So as cities grow really quickly, everything gets built out. When an area kind of comes into its own, everything gets built out all at once. Houses, retail, offices, all of that. And so everything's kind of from the same era and done at the same time. And what that does is it gives you kind of a uniformity. But there's some ways around this in the suburbs. If you go into central Austin, into like a Travis Heights or neighborhoods like that, you're going to see neighborhoods where organically it was built out over 100 plus years, and you're going to get all different styles of architecture and so on. We can't get that exactly in the suburbs, but there are ways we can kind of get close to that, get that look. The first way is to find neighborhoods that were in the suburbs before the suburbs were the suburbs. Meaning these neighborhoods were being developed before that area really popped and before everything came into it. So it was built out maybe over the course of 20 or 30, 40 years. And that way you get some really good variation on architectural styles. Usually the lots are bigger because land was cheap being out there at the time. And then eventually development came to that area and developed around it, and it became a suburb. The other area, or the other way we can find this, is to find custom home neighborhoods, older custom home neighborhoods in the suburbs. Usually they happen around older golf courses, kind of that retro country club golf course from the 70s and 80s. Neighborhoods built around those oftentimes give you that kind of non-cookie cutter look that so many people are looking for. So that's what went into my list today is that was kind of my my formula. And so what I'm doing is I'm trying to find kind of a needle in a haystack, because I'm out in this band between 10 and 20 miles from downtown Austin, searching for these neighborhoods. Let's run through the 7 that I found. And again, hopefully you guys can add to the conversation in the comments. All right, so number 1 on my list is going to be Brushy Creek North. This is up in Round Rock. Brushy Creek North is a fantastic neighborhood for a lot of reasons. Mainly, I love the location. It's very close to shopping. It's close to grocery stores. It's close, really quick into Cedar Park, but it's not so far east that it's reliant on I-35. My beef with a lot of Round Rock neighborhoods is that they're placed so close to I-35 that you are reliant on that highway to move north and south. I'm just not a big fan of I-35, so if it's up to me, I'm going to live further to the west. Now, the tax rate in Brushy Creek is 2.2%. The schools are excellent because it's Round Rock. It was built out predominantly in the early 1980s. Homes range anywhere from 500,000s up to the high 700,000s as of the time of this video. As we know, these prices can move. If you look at some of my older videos, it's ridiculous. I'm looking at the prices and I'm almost falling out of my chair. All right, next on the list is Plantation. So Plantation is a beautiful neighborhood in Round Rock. Just a great feel to it. The issue with Plantation is just finding homes. It's a small enough neighborhood. It doesn't have a really high turnover rate. So, you know, things don't sell that often. So if you're looking for that area, it might take you a while to find something. The tax rate in Plantation is 2.09%. The schools are excellent. Homes were built out predominantly in the mid-1990s. And price point, $700,000 up to a little over $1 million. Okay, number 3 on the list is Oak Bluff Estates in Round Rock. This is probably my favorite Round Rock community on the list, simply because it just clicks with me. I just like the feel and the vibe of this neighborhood personally. Now, the tax rate is 2.09%. The schools are excellent. Again, it's Round Rock. Neighborhood was built out between the 1980s and 1990s, and price points range from the 700s up to a little over $1 million currently. Okay, next on the list is Spicewood at Balcones and Spicewood at Bull Creek. 2 neighborhoods, they're almost identical in so many ways. So I'm going to kind of group them together. They sit right next to one another. And I've talked about Spicewood at Balcones in other videos. It's one of my favorite neighborhoods in Austin. And what makes this such a good choice for this list is, number 1, it's one of those kind of old golf course communities I talked about. And you do have custom homes throughout the neighborhood. So it kind of has that retro feel going for it. But beyond that, it was built out, you know, between the mid 70s all the way up into the early 2000s. So a really good gap in terms of when it was built out. Price points there can run anywhere from $700,000 up to $2 million. The tax rate is 2.24. The location of the neighborhood just in general is really good. You're talking about being 1.5 miles from the Arboretum for shopping. You're 5 miles-ish from the Domain, 4 miles from Apple. It's really positioned well, but the best part about it is it's an Austin address, but it's Round Rock schools. So Round Rock ISD is one of the better school districts, at least in North Austin. And the schools that these neighborhoods feed into are really the top tier of Round Rock ISD. Number 5 on the list is Lakeway. So Lakeway is southwest of Austin. This can be a little confusing because Lakeway is the city. There's Lakeway ISD or school district, and then there's Lakeway, the neighborhood. Now, there's other neighborhoods within the city of Lakeway, but there's only one, what you might call Lakeway proper or classic Lakeway neighborhood. And that's what I'm talking about today. This is the original neighborhood built out around a golf course, and the city built out around that. The cool thing about Lakeway proper, or Lakeway, the neighborhood, is the wide span of time that it was built over. So started in the 1960s, all the way up to modern day, or at least I'll say early 2000s. The homes were all custom. It does have the golf course factor for that kind of higher end home back in the day that gives us the really cool architecture we're looking for today. Price points can range anywhere currently from the 500,000s up to 3 million plus. Because that's such a wide range, I'll give you a median home price in there is probably going to be about 900 to 950K. Currently. Now, the tax rate in Lakeway is going to be right around 2%. It varies in that area, but just as a general average, I'd say around 2%. Also, the schools in Lakeway are really good. Some of the best schools in Southwest Austin are going to be in Lakeway. Number 6 on the list is going to be Shady Hollow. Now, I've mentioned this neighborhood as well in other videos. I just keep coming back to it. It's such a good location in South Austin. Pretty easy access to downtown for those who are commuting there. But when you're in the neighborhood, you don't feel urban at all. It feels very suburban, very peaceful. There's some really great, beautiful tree-lined streets throughout there in the right sections of the neighborhood. Now, homes were built there anywhere from the 1970s up to the 2000s. Taxes run about 1.8%. Schools are excellent. And prices can run anywhere from $500K currently all the way up to over $1 million. Okay, and lastly, we got to talk about Onion Creek. Now, Onion Creek is a bit of a wild card, and it's not going to be for everyone. But for the right folks, Onion Creek could be a really cool find. So let's get into kind of the pros and cons of Onion Creek. Now, Onion Creek started developing back in the 70s. It's a golf course community in South Austin. Now, let's talk about the cons real quick before we go into the pros, because I want to get those out of the way. Con number 1 on Onion Creek is it's built right on I-35 essentially. So you're almost married to I-35 to move north and south, which I've said earlier in the video, not a fan of I-35 if I can avoid it. Secondly, Onion Creek was developed in the 70s. They didn't understand floodplains as well as they do today. And so there's portions of Onion Creek that were built in the floodplain. The lower portions, there's different elevations in the neighborhood, but the lower portions down, if you take Pinehurst down to the bottom, that's where most of them were. That area, most of those have been bought and demoed. The city came in and bought it and demoed it. But understand that if you're in those lower sections of Onion Creek, even though your house isn't in the floodplain, check and see if you're nearby it. Because if I'm buying in Onion Creek, I'm going to want to buy in the sections that are not anywhere near the floodplain, which is a big chunk of the neighborhood. But I'm just saying, if you're going in there, take a look at this. By the way, it's a great program the City of Austin has, Flood Pro ATX. I'll link to it in the description. If you want to look at floodplains in the Austin area, this is going to tell you where they are and where they're projected to go via Atlas 14, which is this kind of new study they're doing on floodplains. But let's get back to Onion Creek. All that being said, on the negative side, actually there's one more negative. So schools are not great there. The elementary is okay. The middle school and high school are just plain bad. So if you've got school-age kids, you're doing the public school thing, that's not going to be the neighborhood for you. Now, with all of that behind us, let's talk about the pros. I think the real opportunity with Onion Creek is that you can get some really, really cool architectural styles, because the neighborhood was all custom. It was all back, built in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s, like some of the other neighborhoods, built around the golf course. You have some really kind of eccentric, different homes in there. So there's a lot to choose from architectural style. There's some really cool homes, and it's affordable compared to many of the other neighborhoods we've talked about. The price point in Onion Creek can run up to $1 million, but they start in the 400s. And the tax rate in Onion Creek is 2.2%. And if you're really after that really cool architecture, or that kind of funky, cool, older vibe or layout to a home, just with amazing skylights and things like that, there's some really neat stuff you can find in there if you're looking. And I think that for the right people who want to be in that part of South Austin and don't have kids going to public school and don't have to get on the highway every day, might be something to look at. All right, so that about does it for our list. I hope this is helpful. If you guys have comments or additions to the list, put them below in the comments section. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.